This happened even before Gorbachev took power. The first ones to find it were workers from an oil platform located far from everything in the northern Pacific Ocean. While digging in the ocean floor, they discovered a very unusual trench, filled with rocky formations none of their specialists recognized. Several geographers were called by the Bashneft to the location, for they needed to know if drilling there was dangerous. But no one was able to decipher which mineral there was. That is, until a biologist analyzed the samples. The results were surprising. Those weren't rocks. Taller than the Ostankino Tower, those were the largest fossilized teeth known to mankind. The Politburo didn't want the West to discover what they had found. So even if the Iron Curtain was still strict, the general population could not be informed. I never knew exactly what they wanted to do with that fossil. Resurrection? Cloning? Trying to find an ancient virus to create bioweapons? Announce to the world they had discovered a never-seen-before superorganism by themselves? I didn't know. And frankly, I didn't want to. I wasn't paid to make questions. In fact, I was just a radar operator. Most of the information I've shared until now was acquired via eavesdropping. As I said, the Politburo was not interested in letting many people know. A hand-picked group of researchers was chosen to investigate further. I was not one of the scientists, but I was a member of the submarine used to accommodate them. Preliminary surveys by the Red Fleet revealed that there were a total of 57 tooth in an irregular circumference of almost 40 kilometers. Between the teeth, the sonars found there was a large trench, which appeared to be much deeper than Mariana's. None of us dared to say it out loud yet, but we knew that was a maw, traces of the largest living being ever found on Earth. I don't know which one of us started it, but we started calling it the Maw of God. Our submarine, the Zhukov 19, was completely reformed to become a mobile laboratory to the scientists that we would take to the depths of the ocean. Biological, geographical, mineral, that vessel could do all the analysis one could think of. Nearly all weapons were removed to make way for their equipment. The Zhukov 19 crew went from 30 to 46, 15 of the smartest scientists of the Union, and a KGB official. And then, we started descending. We kept going low and lower for days. Of course, everything was very slow. For every 100 meters or so, the researchers would put on their fancy diving suits and go out to collect samples. Or at least, it was like that in the beginning. Soon, they started getting bored and even claustrophobic. Submarines are not for everyone, that is a fact. And also, discovering the teeth and the gigantic esophagus of the monster who's hundreds of millions of years old was fun for the first time. But the tests promptly became repetitive. After 2 weeks, it began. First with the scientists, but soon, all of us were having it. Nightmares, night terrors, intrusive thoughts, hallucinations. An enormous, terrible creature that had been dead for a long time, but was sensing us and hoping we would bring it back to life. We stopped sleeping. We started getting angry, depressive or anxious. Some of us knew the Maw was responsible somehow. The KGB officer was the one who resisted it the most. She said the Politburo had ordered the mission could only stop once we reached the very end of the trench, or the deepest we could go without the submarine being destroyed by the pressure. We had rations for months and water filtering machines, apart from sewage disposal. The submarine was nuclear powered, so we didn't have to worry about energy or fuel. After 3 weeks, the scientists had completely stopped going out to collect samples. They just wanted to get back to the surface, but it looked like the creature didn't want us to leave. I calculated the depth we had descended to in secret. It didn't make sense. We had gone down more than 20 kilometers. The submarine should have been splattered at that point. But what could we do? Tell the KGB officer? She would have us declared crazy. Anyone that even mentioned going back to the surface was harshly reprimanded. After nearly 2 months, me and the original crew could not stand it any longer. We had not slept for weeks at that point. We were not harmless scientists. She could have the authority, but we were numerous. We broke into her cabin during the night, but she was awake and saw us. The officer confessed in tears that she was also having the psychological effects, but dreaded telling the Politburo she'd failed. I told her we could help her fraud the reports, tell the higher-ups we had found the bottom. To our surprise, we reached the teeth that we had not seen for months after merely a day going up. And then, we could not go above them. There was solid material blocking our path. The maw had sealed us in. Luckily, the Zhukov-19 had discarded most of its weapons, but not all. We used the torpedo to blow our way out of the maw. Analysis of the submarine's materials revealed they had been compromised by an impossibly strong acid, like if it had been submerged on it for weeks. 4 more days, and the walls of the Zhukov-19 would have let the acid and pressure in. I know that, after all the events, the KGB officer had a talk with the Politburo, and the place was used for nuclear testing not long after. Not many who know about the maw remain. The dreams never stopped. And not everyone was strong enough to withstand having night terrors of being swallowed by the maw of God. Well, I was spending my afternoon reading no-sleep stories, which to me are usually hilarious, when I stumbled upon a strange one. The USSR found something disturbing under the Pacific. Intriguing. When I finished reading it, I decided to write a post of my own. I was surprised one of those poor bastards in the submarine was still alive, differently from what retired Major Lukashenko said. And yes, I know it's you, Lukashenko. There are not a few of us left. There's only one person. Lukashenko himself. How I know all of this? My name is Pyotr Lebedev, and I was the KGB officer charged with supervising and later censoring all information related to the Northern Pacific Great Fossil, or, as they called it, the Maw of God. All members of the crew except for Lukashenko killed themselves, or were executed. If the Soviet Union was still a thing, merely mentioning all of this would be enough for a decade in Siberia. But now things have changed. First, I'm retired. Second, I don't even live in Russia anymore. The whole country has become a massive mafia state, and I left while I still could. Third, the Russian state already wants me dead anyway, because they didn't exactly allow me to leave. So, I don't think it matters. Let's start from the beginning. The descent into the Maw of God happened, and they barely escaped alive. This can be read in Lukashenko's post. After the expedition was when I took charge. The High Command was very perturbed by the reports, but that was not when they decided to stop tests. In total, 4 expeditions were made into the Northern Pacific Great Fossil. The first, which Lukashenko already wrote about, and then 3 others headed by the Alternative Sciences Secretariat, an obscure branch of the KGB responsible for investigating possible paranormal phenomena. The second and third expeditions were more successful than the first one. We were able to estimate the age of the creature at being approximately 2 billion years old. Tests inside the maw confirmed two interesting facts. Once any sufficiently large object entered it, the teeth would gradually close in, blocking the exits, and the water would slowly be replaced by fluoroantimonic acid. But the tests proved that this period of replacement, which in the first expedition took nearly 2 months, was reduced to 1 month during the third expedition. Subsequent geothermal analysis concluded there was an exceptionally large creature connected to the maw 30 miles below the sea level, deep into the trench. This creature was somehow connected to the teeth, even if they were not alive anymore by themselves. The second expedition believed there were underground tendrils connected to the teeth, but no evidence was presented. However, it's debatable if the teeth were not really alive. This is because of a simple reason. The first submarine was able to exit, blowing through one of the teeth using a torpedo. The second expedition had to use 4 torpedoes. The third used around 20. But the fourth submarine was never able to get out. Do you understand what I'm getting at? Not only the fossilized teeth were getting stronger somehow, the destroyed teeth themselves were completely replaced by the time a new expedition went in. The Politburo was fascinated by these teeth. If we were able to find a way to use them, to research them, we would have the strongest tanks in the world. Fortresses would be indestructible, missile-proof cities, and our trains would never need maintenance because their structure would regrow. That's why, in the October of 1983, 6 months after the first expedition, Project Maw was started. To guarantee secrecy, all information related to the project was sent via helicopter in letters to a KGB officer in Vladivostok who would make weekly summaries and send them to Moscow. I was this officer. Project Maw was an ambitious project. The oil platform would be transformed in the gateway to a massive underwater station where the ground would be drilled and the teeth and its components studied, and if possible, even extracted. There would be nearly 1,000 workers and 50 of the best scientists in the country. In hindsight, this was a very dumb idea. The cost was exorbitant, and the scientists were pressured to provide results as fast as they could, causing many accidents and risking rushed and unsafe measures. A gamble by the Politburo that the profit would be so great that it would compensate the gargantuan losses. Well, in the end, this whole operation ended up being a small factor in the collapse of the Soviet Union because of the massive losses. Some even called it Eastern Chernobyl. At first, the entire thing was pretty boring. Every 2 days, Director Pushchinkin would send me a new letter. Comrade Lebedev, a new underwater tunnel section was finished yesterday. Comrade Lebedev, we have extracted new samples from the 15th teeth. Comrade Lebedev, drilling operations have started in sector whatever. Yes, everything was terrifyingly boring during the first months. The only bad thing was that the workers and scientists were reporting nightmares. But that side effect was already known, and we believed it was derived from the isolation. If only it stayed the only bad thing. It was in the 19th day of February 1984 when things changed. The helicopter pilot, who every 2 days would go there with supplies and bring out the ladders, told me when he last went there, the entire facility was seemingly abandoned. The next day, I personally went with a military helicopter to verify what was happening. I hoped that they were all at the underwater tunnels when the pilot came. But in my mind, I knew something was very wrong. Upon arriving, I confirmed what the pilot said. The entirety of the former oil platform was empty, like if everyone had suddenly been evacuated. When we used the elevator to go to the underwater outpost, there was a violent scene expecting us. In the main corridor, there were hundreds of bodies, some of them in advanced decomposition, like they had been dead for weeks. Walking among the bodies, there were naked people covered in corals, algae and blood. Director Puschinkin was in the middle of this insanity, using a drill to perforate the eyes of a random worker who was being held by other two of the algae-covered men. I didn't waste time trying to understand what happened. I immediately ordered my men to shoot everyone that moved. We then ran back to the elevator, and as soon as we exited in the former oil rig, I personally shot the cables. The next thing, I entered the director's office and took his computer. After that, we left as quickly as possible, and we used the helicopter guns to bombard the former oil rig until it collapsed into the ocean. As it fell, we could hear, even with the explosions and the helicopter loud noises, a gargantuan growling coming from deep beneath the sea. As soon as I arrived back in Vladivostok, I turned on the director's computer. There were videos of the security cameras. These corals and algae had been growing on the people working there for weeks. There was not a single registered medical appointment to verify what was happening to everyone. More than 90% of everyone there had these maritime life things all over their bodies. The only people who had not were those who only stayed in the former oil rig and rarely, if ever, went to the underwater tunnels. But it wasn't just that. For weeks, they had been killing people using drills and pickaxes, and then walking over the bodies like nothing was happening, like they didn't realize what was happening. No one even looked at the bodies, as if they were invisible. These killings occurred at random. One moment, they were working together. Then, they were drilling the brain of someone, and then working again like nothing had happened. But the worst of all were not the humans. It was the coral-like demons who roamed corridors in the underwater sections, sometimes in plain view, and no one noticed them. Every time one of them walked in one of the tunnels, a murder occurred not long after. Immediately, I asked my supervisor for help. He arranged a flight for me to Moscow the next day, and I had to go before the Politburo. That was maybe the most tense moment of my life. I had been in shootouts. I fought in Afghanistan. I had investigated other paranormal phenomenon. I had even infiltrated the Chinese Secret Service before. But that was rough. And I had to tell them, I have destroyed the access to the facility because the thing down there was somehow corrupting the workers. The footage shows that strange fish beings were infiltrating the outpost, and people have been dying for weeks without anyone noticing. Secretary General Chernyenko, who had been brought from the hospital to the meeting, was furious, told me, "You're saying you destroyed the entrance to a research facility that cost us billions of rubles because fish demons were killing everyone, and that no one noticed?" Luckily, I had brought the director's computer on me, and I showed them everything. The Politburo was as appalled as I was when I first saw the footage. Chernyenko then said something like, "If this leaks, the population will not trust us anymore. Even if Director Puschinkin didn't tell you what was really happening, it was your duty to keep us informed. And you failed. Listen to me, Agent Lebedev, and listen very well. You will eliminate every trace, every document, everything that could say Operation Ma happened." I lost count of how many papers I burned, how many computers I dismantled, how many people I bribed, how many people I've silenced. And I will not lie, this was the easiest part. Things only got really difficult to cover up after the Petrova Incident in early 1987. Petrova was a small town in the Kamchatka Peninsula, in the frozen and desolate coastal Siberia. It had a population of 7,000, and the city only existed because of a mining facility located near the town. That facility employed almost the entire town, with the exception of some fishermen and port workers, a teacher and 2 policemen. But soon, no one would be employed in Petrova anymore, because everyone would die. The Petrova Incident happened in May 9th, 1987. I was in my office in Vladivostok when an urgent call by the Minister of Defense came in. He said he was coming to Vladivostok along with several high-ranking military officers and the head of the KGB. They ordered me to prepare a concise report on everything I knew about the Maw of God and to print dozens of copies, and that I was to meet them at the military airport in 6 hours and to bring my rifle. I immediately knew something very bad was going on. 6 hours later, when their plane arrived, I was there along with at least 100 soldiers that were called by the army. Everyone there was given a copy of the report I had made. I remember how some of them laughed, thinking this was their craziest military drill. I wish it was, but it wasn't. I entered a combat helicopter with the Minister of Defense and the leader of the KGB and saw that small army entering armored large helicopters and leaving Vladivostok. We followed them from behind. Did the Maw awake? I asked the Minister of Defense. I couldn't tell whether I was more afraid of him or the creature. The minister looked at me with his eyes dead serious and just answered, "Niet, not the Maw." After a few hours, we approached a frozen coastal small town. I did not know its name yet, but soon I'd know that town was Petrova. As our vehicles came closer, I could see something absolutely horrible. There were bodies spread across the entire town, so much blood we could see it from miles away. The helicopter landed a half-mile from the city, mine last, and then we slowly proceeded towards the town. I kept wanting desperately to go back, to leave that place, but I was able to resist the urges. And from the rapid breaths and uneasy eyes of the soldiers, I could easily see I wasn't the only one that desired to leave. When we got in the small town, reaching the small square in its entrance, I was able to give a better look at the bodies. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. The evil, the way every single one of them had. I can't describe it. They were crushed and brutalized in ways that surpassed human creativity. Many of the soldiers started vomiting, and some began having anxiety or panic attacks. We noticed that the more we walked into the town, the more mangled and broken the bodies got. "What type of animal does this?" my boss, the chief of KGB, muttered. "This wasn't the work of an animal, Comrade Chebrikov," the Minister of Defense said. When we got to the town hall, located in the center of that small town, we heard a very loud growl coming from inside, but not a bear or a tiger. This sounded like an inhumanly loud human growling. The soldiers prepared their weapons. Even I grabbed my pistol. The mix of tension, fear, and concentration was so intense, you could practically smell it. It lasted for only a minute, but it felt like an hour. The door of the town hall was slowly opened, and out of it came a human figure covered in blood, entrails, and algae. He gently staggered towards us, his smiling movements those of someone who drank too much. Everyone was aiming at him, but no one dared shooting.
"What are you waiting for? Shoot! Shoot!"
The Minister of Defense shouted the loudest his lungs and vocal cords possibly could. Everyone began firing. Bullets perforated the thing and all of its surroundings. The being fell to the floor. Blood splattered everywhere. We slowly stopped firing. Some soldiers recharged their weapons. And then, the creature burst into a frenzy of laughter. It rolled around in the floor laughing so loud. The whole thing was so unexpected that we began to laugh too. At first, some timid smiles and soft giggles, but it soon evolved into full-on laughter. And then everyone was laughing. Many of us laughing so much, they started falling on the floor too. Even my boss was laughing like he had just won the lottery, and I had never seen him even smiling before. Then it started. A gunshot. Then another. Then another. Then another. I pressed my belly as hard as I could to stop laughing and looked at the soldiers. I saw one of them laughing while moving his handgun to his left temple and then blowing his head. Everyone kept laughing and then committing suicide. I felt the urge to blow my brains, but I threw my pistol away before I could do that.
Comrade! Comrade Lebedev! Watch out!
Chebrikov, the head of the KGB, said. I looked back in the direction of the creature, only to find out it was right in front of me. I finally saw, amidst all the blood, guts, algae, and the putrid smell, that I recognized that person.
Comrade Director Pushchinkin? But how? You died 3 years ago. I myself order your death.
I screamed, as surprised as I was terrified. At least I finally stopped laughing.
Death is merely a concept, Comrade Lebedev,
he began saying, his voice as deep and guttural as the Marianas Trench.
I have been blessed by the god. My soul has become immortal, as he is.
He smiled. Who? Are you talking about the Maw?
Do you really think the Maw is all they are? That is merely one of their parts. That mouth is nothing compared to their size and magnificence. They were buried long ago, when humanity was but a whisper. But we have now awakened them.
The director said, raising his arms high above his head, as if he was praying. When he did that, all the soldiers started shooting themselves again. Then, I heard a helicopter flying away. I looked back. The Minister of Defense and my boss were gone. They had left me with that thing. I was sure I was about to die in that moment.
Comrade Lebedev, it seems you are alone now.
Are you going to kill me? I discreetly grabbed my emergency cyanide pill that I had in my pocket.
Kill you? Why would I do that?
The dead director laughed. 2 of the undead soldiers grabbed me by the arms and held me, while Pushchinkin produced an old rusty hook.
You will tell the Kremlin the only way to get rid of the Maw is with nuclear weapons.
As if a nuke would damage that monster, I shouted, trying to break free from the dead soldier's grip.
Ha. No, it would not. That's not why it wants to be nuked. But let me tell you a secret, comrade.
He came closer to me and whispered in my ear.
Pain is delicious, Comrade Lebedev.
And then, I felt the worst pain I ever felt. He had hooked my jaw. I contorted myself with all of my strength, crying from the pain. He tied an algae to the hook and started pulling it slowly but firmly. And soon, he had ripped my jaw off. The undead soldiers released me, but I was in so much pain that I just fell to the floor in fetal position, crying.
Isn't it good to have your teeth ripped off?
He asked, laughing maniacally. I literally could not answer. I ended up passing out. But before I did, I saw Pushchinkin and the undead soldiers walking towards the sea. That's not the end of it, however, as I had not died that day. Although sometimes, I wish I did. Have you ever tried to talk without using your jaw? It's impossible. As I lied on that street of Petrova, bleeding, I could only think of something besides the pain and the almost certain probability I would be dying very soon. How the fuck was I supposed to tell the Politburo anything without a jaw? I woke up a few days later in a hospital bed. The room I was in was dark, and had no mirrors or windows. I still felt painful as hell. I tried to call a nurse, only to remember I couldn't, because I had no jaw anymore and I was too weak to even move. So my only option was to wait. And wait I did. I don't know for how long I laid there, alone with my thoughts. But even if I was factually alone, I didn't feel as much. There was this overwhelming sensation creeping through my mind that something was there with me in that cold and dark hospital room. As I said, I was still very weak, sometimes awake, sometimes unconscious. Didn't know when was when. I remember one of the nurses finally entered the room. I was finally asleep when I heard the creaking door opening and soft steps. "Oh, you're awake, Comrade Tychek," she said in clear shock. That wasn't my name, but maybe she got it wrong. "Am I?" I asked weakly. Better. I tried to. All she could hear were incomprehensible noises. I didn't have a jaw after all. "Please don't try to speak, comrade. This could tear the stitches." "Is there anything I can write on?" I asked, before remembering she wouldn't hear. It's funny how attached to talking we are. I made some gestures, signaling I wanted something I could write on. She brought me a notebook and a pencil. "I need to contact the Politburo." She read what I wrote. "I need to contact the Politburo? I'm sorry, comrade." She laughed. "How could I even do that?" I took the notebook back and wrote, "I'm KGB." "Well, Comrade Tychek," she sighed. "I think the accident harmed your mental faculties." "Accident?" "Comrade, you are not a KGB agent." She giggled. "You're a mining worker. You suffered a terrible accident last week. Barely survived." I immediately knew what was going on. Probably the KGB deemed me too dangerous. Maybe they thought I knew too much, or could see them as responsible for my horrible injuries, and consider defecting. The USSR was already in a bad shape at the time. A lot of people were fleeing. Well, the KGB methods are incredibly effective. But they won't work with someone who routinely implemented them. However, that nurse clearly wasn't involved. They had probably crafted a whole new backstory for me, convinced everyone about it, in hope I would be successfully gaslighted. That's one of the tactics we used. But even if I kept knowing the truth, this would make things extremely difficult. No one would listen to a jawless man claiming to be from the KGB, and that he has information on an eldritch abomination under the ocean. But if the things that accursed monster told me were true, it was a matter of time before the doom that came to Petrova happened again. Not that I would know if it happened. These things were always censored. I had really two options. Either I went after my boss and got arrested for impersonating a KGB officer, or I waited until they came to me desperate on how to deal with the mob. After a month in the hospital, they allowed me to go. The KGB had provided me with a small house in a small town on the outskirts of Vladivostok, new documentation, and a job at the mine I got injured at. The first thing people asked when I went to work was, "Who is the new guy with no jaw?" So yeah, even if I was successfully gaslighted, the fact that nobody knew me in the mine would instantly reveal the truth. Then suddenly, 5 weeks after I woke up in the hospital, I woke up to find out my jaw was somehow back. Oh, how good it was to have it back. Do you know how horrible it is to only be able to drink and eat using a funnel, water and soup? But even if my jaw was back, it seemed wrong. I mean, it worked perfectly. But it looked like it was somehow grossly stitched. No, not sewn. Amalgamated carelessly. It was all crooked, had several scars and looked rotten. Somehow, it looked dead. I could feel and move it, but it felt dead. 2 days after my jaw was unexplainably back, my mouth started talking to me on its own. I know it seems absurd, but it literally started moving and saying cryptic things in this deep and inhuman old voice. Things like, what to do when happiness fades into boredom, what to do when sadness turns into apathy, what to do when fear becomes ordinary, what to do when anger becomes neutrality. At first, it talked only once per day, but then it started talking more and more. Soon, barely an hour went by without me hearing it saying cryptic words. Eventually, as I knew they would, the KGB stopped by and ordered me to come with them. I was taken to the office I used to work in Vladivostok. My boss, Comrade Chebrikov, was waiting in my old room, along with another officer, Comrade Saburova. I assumed that she had taken the position I left vacant. Comrade Lebedev. Chebrikov sighed. He was clearly very uncomfortable with the whole situation. Do you remember me? Da. Do you really think this whole circus could work with me? The minister said it would probably be safer this way, Comrade Saburova said when she saw Chebrikov was too ashamed to talk. She continued. You had been through a lot. Being under such trauma can corrupt someone's mind, and a man as skilled as you are could be especially dangerous in the hands of the enemies of the proletariat. After she said that, there was an extended period of tense silence. Well, Comrade Lebedev, I see you got yourself a new jaw, my boss said. Well, not even I know how it happened. I simply woke up with a new jaw some days ago. Look, Pyotr, we need your help, he finally said. Oh, I surely needed your help when you left me to die in Petrova, or when the state was literally brainwashing me. We did what we had to do, Comrade Lebedev, Saburova said. Oh, come on, Pyotr. You know this is standard protocol. You doubted my loyalty, I screamed. I'm sorry. What I did wasn't right, and you don't need to forgive me. This is not about me. I'm not here to merely apologize or catch up with you and your weird new mouth. The mall, its attacks are continuing relentlessly. 6 villages massacred, 2 towns razed, 5 harbors destroyed, 2 military bases slaughtered, more than 5,000 dead, and the bodies keep piling up. We have had to evacuate more than 30,000 east, and the attacks are coming dangerously close to Korea. This could spark an international incident, Comrade Saburova said. Every time they attack, they take all the bodies they caused with them to the sea. That thing is amassing a massive army. An army with our own soldiers, Chebrikov said. We have tried everything. Bullets of all calibers, missiles, fires, blades, radiation. Nothing works. They won't even talk to us. They just attack, Saburova continued. What makes you think I would be able to talk to them? I asked. I may have underestimated your intelligence, Comrade Lebedev. He pointed to my mouth. We know it talks, and we have reason to believe it listens, Saburova said. Duh, of course you bugged my house. Niet, we bugged you. There are 3 listening devices installed inside you, Saburova declared. How lovely. How do you make it talk? Chebrikov asked. I don't. It talks on its own. Very annoying, I must say. Ja, are you listening to us? Saburova asked. I have one idea. Chebrikov raised his handgun and pointed at my forehead. Either you talk, or I'll be killing your host body. What the hell are you doing, comrade? Saburova asked, faking that she was surprised. I was not scared at all. I doubted he would kill me. That was standard KGB interrogation procedures. They had probably even rehearsed it. But to my surprise, it actually worked.
What happens when a surprise happens so many times? It stops surprising you.
The jaw suddenly asked with its weird deep voice. It starts bothering you, Saburova answered.
First it becomes typical, then it becomes a bother, and last, it becomes boring.
The jaw said. But what does this have to do with anything? Cherbakov asked.
I may have overestimated your intelligence, human.
The jaw sneered. Cherbakov, I think it may be trying to tell us something, Saburova said. It's a waste of time. It's mocking us, he shouted angrily.
We have already stated our demand to the host,
the jaw declared. What does it want, Pyotr? Cherbakov asked. It wants to be nuked, I answered. What? Both of them said. You have heard what it said in the past. You have heard what it said now. All emotions cause boredom to the mouth. It has lived for 2 billion years. It wants to die? Saburova asked. No. It just wants to feel, I answered. Oh. I will talk with the Politburo, Cherbakov said. 2 weeks later, I was returned my old identity and given an official apology and compensation by the higher-ups in the form of a beautiful apartment in one of the richest neighborhoods of Moscow and an even prettier pension. 3 weeks later, I was invited to watch the explosion by Cherbakov. I spent several hours on an airplane until we landed on a Kiev-class aircraft carrier. The sun was rising. Cherbakov and Saburova were there. They handed me a pair of sunglasses and binoculars. Not long after, we saw the plane carrying the bomb taking off. It approached the place where the ruins of that old oil station stood. The plane opened its compartment, and something fell out of it. We avoided looking straight at it on impact. But then, we went back to looking at it. A massive mushroom rose above the Pacific. And for the first time since I was interrogated by my former boss in Saburova, my jaw spoke.
So delicious.